Welcome to another episode of the IBC Guys. Today, Mike Stevens is back. So I've had to be careful, Mike. This was turning into like a Dateline NBC or 48 Hours podcast because people thought you were gone missing, like you were buried in some woods somewhere. We had to go find you, put your face up, and make it all dramatic. So it's nice to have you back. But that's all I'm trying to say. So welcome back.
Thanks,
We
Dave.
got we're recording this the day after Father's Day. You had a good Father's Day. You were telling my boys about it. Had a good one as well. We had steak and cake. So we had steak for lunch, and then my daughter made a cake. And it's fun to be around, be a dad. So you had a
Very
similar
good.
experience. You were telling me.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I had three of the four boys home, and we did we just did all kinds of stuff for the day. Played some golf, played some pickleball, played a long time family board game. Long time as in one that I played when I was a kid. Yeah, the game hasn't been around for, I think they stopped making it about 40, 50 years ago. So the game is in is dilapidated. I mean, it's in shambles, taped up, but it's still like the greatest board game of all time, in my opinion. So we did that. We grilled out, had some steaks as well, had some fish from our trip up in Manitoba. So
Yeah.
that was a great day.
So we haven't, yeah, you and I on the podcast have not had a chance to talk about that. It was a great trip. We did more catching than fishing, and we got some. I haven't done it yet. I need to be better at social media stuff. Throw them up there. It makes me look like I know what I'm doing, and I have no idea what I'm doing in fishing. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. So, but also I want to bring up something else that's happened since the last time you've been on the podcast. What do you know what that I'm
Uh-oh.
thinking?
No.
Your puppies came.
Oh, yes.
So yeah,
Our
Mike's
Bernese
dog had.
Mountain Dog had puppies.
So they're very, very cute. The pet still lives, and whether or not they will take one home, but no, I don't think it's happening. But yeah, so we're hopefully getting to go out to your house here in a month or two, see those pups. But they're getting big. Mike's got his little chart going. I think it's kind of cute. You're documenting everything. I don't know if that's necessary for the vet or reselling them.
It's
I don't
kind of
know.
important. The chart has to do with weights. So we're just weighing the puppies to make sure that they're gaining the proper amount every day. So, and they are.
I just like how
Yeah, it's all
succinct
good.
you got it all. So it looks good. So all right, but enough catching up. We got a good topic today. So I will say again, reiterate, it's nice to have you back. Doing these by yourself, talking into an empty microphone, it's not as much fun as having your buddy on the call. But let me do the podcast stuff. So this podcast exists for three reasons. One is to get information out there about IBC. We would much rather you understand IBC and have a working knowledge of it and then make a decision, yay or nay, than never heard of it all. So that's the first goal. The second goal is to give you tangible examples. We try and do that every week. We're going to try to do that again this week. But how does this apply? It's not a matter of if IBC can apply, it's how. And we'll talk through a little bit of that today from a different perspective. Then the third one is to get this out to as many people as we can. So if you would share, subscribe, like, I think those are the options. I don't know. But then on top of that, I think I shared this a couple weeks ago. We're getting feedback that people would appreciate some deeper perspective or going deeper into these things. I don't know exactly what that means. We have an idea, but we would know exactly what that means if you would give us a phone call or an email. We'd be happy to talk to you about it. So the phone number is 507-205-2284. My email is dave@familybankingsolutions.com. Mike's is mike at familybankingsolutions.com. Um, give us a shout. We can certainly go into depth. And a lot of the detail going deeper depends on the person. So we'll talk a little bit about today in our topic. But that's the best way we can do that for you um, in terms of going deeper. All right, Michael, today The topic is how much money should go into my first policy. So setting the stage. You've done a lot of IBC listening. By you, I mean the person that's on the other side of this podcast. Done a lot of IBC listening. You've vetted Dave and Mike. These guys are a couple crazy dudes. Does this check out? It does. Nelson Nash, he's the Godfather. Mike's Godfather 1A. But everything checks out. I'm gonna get a policy. How much should I put in there? That's the question. And we want to talk through that today. So I wrote some things down, being the teacher I am. I really think that we need to define what premium is. So I'm going to try and define it, and I'd ask that you kind of add in what your thoughts are. So when we say how much premium should go into my first policy, premium has two parts to it, the way we build these things. There's the base premium. And the base premium, Mike, is essentially what buys the life insurance. So that's the first part. The second part is what's called the paid up additions, the PUA. Another acronym you'll hear is the FPUR, and that may be specific to a company. I guess I don't know, but vocabulary. But what that does, the paid up additions, is that is essentially the banking function that allows the money to flow in and out, the liquidity of what we do. So the base, just to reiterate, the base is what buys the insurance. The paid up additions is the liquidity, the banking aspect of how we build these things. So that's the definition of premium. Thoughts, questions on that, Mike, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it basically kind of supercharges the banking function of the policy. The premium that goes into the base also builds cash value over time, but it's much slower had we not designed it with a PUA attached. So yeah, when that is something that's very common, that when people and different companies present that. Some say, oh, the premium is just the base, and then some say the premium is the total that you're putting in, basic plus the PUA. But very common question that we get is when they're in, when people are interested, like, hey, this is a no-brainer. We want to start our IBC policy. How much should we start with? So it's kind of an impossible question for us because we
Yeah.
don't know your financial situation. We don't know what your comfort level is. We don't know what your cash flow is. I mean, it's just, but I think that as far as the amount, it has to be something that you're comfortable with, in that it's kind of above and beyond your normal cash flow, your normal monthly cash flow of your family. Now, if you have a big lump sum, you have money in savings, you have a pile of cash sitting around, I mean, that's a totally different story. But it should be something that you're comfortable with, because the idea of the IBC, the infinite banking concept, the concept is you are building a warehouse of wealth, to use Nelson Nash's term in his second book, with Bob Murphy and Carlos Lara, by the way. You're building a sort of your own family bank, a storage of cash for you to use down the road. You can use it immediately, but down the road, to fund life, to fund things that you normally would go to a bank for, to borrow money, like homes, cars, weddings, vacations, the list goes on and on. So again, I don't know if I jumped ahead here on the questions that were, questions that we get, but it's a personal decision that we can kind of help you. We can talk through and walk through the process, but at the end of the day, it kind of depends on each individual client.
So yeah, you gave us. So we were talking about definitions, and then you stole the thunder for the end, Mike. So I love it. It's nice to have you back. No,
I'm sorry.
there's no, I'm teasing you. There's no rhyme or reason. What I struggle with when I'm trying to learn something new, and again, I'm trying to put myself in the perspective of the listener. When the guys who claim to know what they're talking about, which in this case is you and I, provide the answer, well, it depends. I always hate that answer. So my goal in this is, what does it depend on? That's kind of the goal, because you are absolutely correct. You can't provide that answer. And maybe that's misleading in terms of how much you should put in terms of like the question of this podcast. But the goal is to help you think through your own situation. That's the goal. It's not for us to tell you what that is. I had a person I was talking with. They got not frustrated. That's too strong a word, but they said, Dave, what should I do? I said, I can't answer that. No. You don't understand. I just want you to tell me what I should do based on what you know of my situation. I said, I can't do that. Can't tell you. It's not my job. It's not my responsibility. I don't know if I legally can do that. I'm a producer. I can give you what I've done, and I can say, maybe there's some guidelines, parameters, but you need to choose. And I think this falls along those lines, Mike. We don't get to pick how much premium goes into these policies. I think that's your complete point. It's up to the individual. Thus, it depends. But let's talk through a little bit of maybe what it depends on and why it depends on those things. So we defined it, the base and the paid up additions, and you did a great job. There is some cash value in the base, but the supercharge, the banking in my idea, comes from the paid up additions. So there's a little combination of both of those, hence the reason we do both. But that's kind of the definition of premium. So when we say premium, it's both of those aspects. Now, let's talk about it from the insurance company's perspective. And you know this much better than I do, having been doing this, for much longer than I have. But from the insurance company's perspective, how much should someone be putting in? Does that question make sense? Because I have one specific answer in mind. Your face says that doesn't make sense. Here's where my question's coming from, Mike. On the application, when we apply for these things on behalf of the client, there's an income portion. So based on that income portion, there tends to be some thresholds that exist for the insurance companies based on how big the policy could be. That's what I'm trying to get at. Can you expand on or expound on that at all?
Well, yeah, the insurance company obviously wants you to be able to, fund your policy and pay for the policy over time. So they are going to look at your income and see, what they think your let's say passive income or disposable cash income is probably a better explanation for it. And yeah, there's some limits on that, and that varies by company. But I mean, again, ultimately, this is you're saving up cash to create your own banking function, your own banking system. So the question comes down to, well, what are you saving now? If you're saving 10% of your income, and I don't care where you think you're putting that, but that's a good start. Like, I'm living on 90% of my take home cash. I'm saving 10% and then start taking that 10% and putting it into an IBC policy. I mean, that's a good starting point. Now, again, if you have liquid cash, different assets that you can that's sitting in some other type of warehouse, sitting in a savings account or a checking account or whatever, and you want to move that and kind of supercharge your banking system up front, that's a different story. But when you're looking at just on monthly cash flow, typically a good starting point is, kind of that 10%, or what are you saving? Some people are saving more than that, which is fantastic. But I think a couple years ago, I saw the national average for Americans saving was like 4 point something. I mean, it was terrible. It was in the 4% range. I don't know if that's gone up or down in the last few years, but bottom line is you need to live below your means. You need to spend on a monthly basis less than you bring in. I mean, that's really the first obstacle in your mind that you have to overcome is, what am I bringing in? What am I spending? And what's left over? That's really a good place to start, kind of building your banking function. Now, if that changes over time, I think one thing that people don't fully understand is the fact that this isn't a one-time, like, I'm going to start this one banking system, this IBC policy, and that it's got to be able to meet my needs from today and 50 years from now. That's not the case. Start with something you're comfortable with, start small, and you can always get a second one, a third one, a fifth one, a 20th one. I mean, you can always build on that. Kind of like the banking system, you have a bank, but then they open up another branch here and another branch there, and they start getting bigger and bigger. This is the same type of thing, is you can start with one and see how that works out for you. And if you're super comfortable with that, then you'll start a second one and you'll start a third one.
You know why I'm smiling? Because I'm highly
I do.
confident. I know you know. That's why I asked. But I'm highly confident you have not listened to last week's episode. And on last week's episode, that's exactly what I talked about. And we gave the same answer. So that makes me happy. And we talked about how many
Nice.
policies should we have. And that's exactly kind of the progression and maybe that's just people's experience, but that was my experience as well. We started with one and then we grew and grew and grew, and now we're at five. So, and I know you have several more than just five, but that's kind of how it happens. But let me jump back to the first ones. We're talking the initial policy. So the insurance, I'm going to go back to the insurance company. There are thresholds. They will not let you put $1 million in when your yearly income is $80,000. They're not. I mean, there's something going on there. They'll check it out. There's just some parameters that exist, and like you said, it's different per insurance company. It's different per situation. If you are, owners in companies, but or on paper, you have that set up. There's just different things. So there is the insurance company's perspective on how much premium can be put in that first policy. You jumped into, which was my next question. What is your anecdotal perspective? What do you see people doing? And you nailed it in terms of they're using what they're already saving. And that is probably the smoothest dovetail into these things. If they're already saving, rather than putting it in a savings account, and I had this exact conversation with a couple this week, rather than making 0.5% in a savings account, I was able to show them the benefits that exist in putting in the IBC policy, not only a greater rate of return, but the death benefit aspect, the liquidity, as well as, and I think we've talked about this, but the non-direct recognition. So when that money is borrowed and used on whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, that money stays in the ledger. And we've talked about that several times. So that's the anecdotal perspective, like the experience, what people are doing. But you also jumped into, which was my next point, start with something small. And we talked about that a little bit last week. You can build these things smaller and just get more and more. But specific to the first one, find something that you can save for that small. I like the example, and you can tell me if you don't like this or maybe have a different thought, but of homeowners insurance. My homeowners insurance, I think it's $2,500 a year. I know everyone's varies depending on the home itself and the location. Let's just use $2,500. That's something we save for each month. So I could put that into a policy. I could borrow against that cash value, pay my homeowner's insurance. But now I've monetized that money I'm already going to spend. That $2,500 is on the ledger. And the next year I do it, still pay my second year's homeowner's insurance, but I have $5,000 on the ledger. That's something small and tangible that you can do. So that's kind of where I start. Is that what you do with people, or again, is it just solely dependent on the situation?
Yeah, I think it solely depends on the situation.
Okay.
And I know, again, we chatted briefly before this, and I know one thing that I saw on your notes here. I don't want to jump ahead again, but
Do it.
there's in this process, the money that you put in to build this thing, the first year, you don't have 100% of that available. So if you're looking at putting in, say, $2,500 for X homeowners insurance or whatever it is, and you put that in your IBC policy, and with the hopes of then turn around and taking that out and paying your homeowners insurance, that first year you're not quite going to have that $2,500. So that's one obstacle that you have to overcome, is that
Let's say that's
first year.
the biggest obstacle. Would you agree with that or not?
I agree. That's probably the biggest obstacle in starting your policy, is that it's about 60%, give or take. Again, depends on the client, depends on your sex, depends on, because actuarially women live longer, so women are a little more efficient than men, age, health, etc. There's a lot of things that go into that, in addition to the mix on, or the blend or what have you, the way we design them, and we're going to design it based on those parameters as well. But it's ballpark, I would say it's in the kind of that 60% range. So if you put in $1,000, you're only going to have about 600 that first year. Year two is pretty much going to be dollar for dollar, but that year one is about 60%.
Well, and
So
that
that's
is,
the biggest obstacle.
yeah, and that is in my notes. But my next question to you is, can you think of other obstacles? Like what? And I don't want to say, I say obstacles, hurdles is the word I use because it can be jumped. You can do it, but it's a big hurdle. So obstacles, they're all, I mean, they're all synonyms essentially for what we're trying to do. But can you think of another one? I don't have an answer for that. Is there another hurdle?
I don't either. I think that's probably the biggest, the biggest one. When we sit down and we discuss with people the benefits of starting your own infinite banking system in one of these IBC policies, I mean, the number one hurdle is that first year. And when we explain the benefits are what you run through this system over time comes back to your family. We've mentioned that several times on this podcast, which is kind of a mind-blowing statement. It took me several months really to wrap my mind around it. But everything you run through this system over time comes back to your family with the way you do it. So once you wrap your mind around that, most people immediately go to, well, if everything I run through here comes back to my family, I want to run everything through there. Like I mean, this is easy.
Yep.
Well, let's just take a round number here, and let's say your household income is $100,000, and that's what you bring in, and let's say you're spending 90,000 and you're saving 10%. Okay, that's great. But if you were to put $100,000 into this policy the first year, you're not going to have $90,000 to go out and spend on life. You're only going to have 60. So that's the number one hurdle, is being able to overcome that first year, kind of like starting a business. I mean, most people that start businesses, you're investing a lot of capital up front. You're not really going to turn a profit in the first year. I mean, sometimes it's about 7 years. I think average is about 5 to 7 years turn a profit in a business. So this is kind of that same thing. Is you're starting a business, you're starting a cash flow system, and it's going to take time to start reaping the financial benefits of that. The first year is not that year. You have to overcome that hurdle.
So let's use the $2,500 example real quick for my homeowner's insurance. That first year, I put $2,500 in. I'm only able to get out in cash value $1,500 of it. So I have to supplement $1,000 of that 2,500. So that's what we're speaking to. You don't get 100% of the cash value out. But let's take that and let's extrapolate it over 20 years. If I put $2,500 in for 20 years, I'm at $50,000. And mathematically, it's contractual. We can show you how it works. In that 20 years, at the end, I'll have $50,000 in my account, even though I've paid my homeowner's insurance for 20 years at $2,500 a year. So that's when Mike says everything you run through your policy comes back to you. I'll have $50,000 in my policy at the end of those 20 years. So let's take it the next step and go back to what Mike said. Is what happens is you start small. You tend to start small. This is my experience as well. And then you realize the power of this called the snowball effect. I'm not stealing Dave Ramsey's thing, but it starts to snowball and you get bigger and bigger return each year you come, and you start to realize, holy smokes, I'm spending this money anyway. How much can I run through? And that's where your second, your third, your fourth, your fifth policy comes into play. So it all fits together. And I think we have a different perspective than the listener. We should have a different perspective than the listener because we've been doing this for a while and working with people. But that's the progression. And going back to how much should I put into my first policy? We're coming back full circle to the question, Mike. The answer is it depends. And that's a terrible answer when you want something to hold on to, but it absolutely depends. And that's where my recommendation is. Is there something that you can identify in your budget, like your homeowner insurance, like a car payment? And can you make up that 40% difference that first year? Mike's point of $100,000, it's really hard to make up $40,000. Even if you're saving 10, that's $30,000. It's a big ask. But if you start with something that's $1,000 a year, most people, if they're saved, go to Starbucks a few less times a month, go out to eat less, less or whatever, they can make up the $400, $300 difference that exists there. Starting with something small, but they're building up that cash value at $1,000 a year. And then once they get the hang of it, they want that second, they want that third policy. So how much does it, or how much should go into your first policy? How much should I put in there? It depends. And I hate to leave it that way, but it's absolutely the truth. So, Mike, thoughts, additions, perspectives?
Yeah, I can see it. It is it was frustrating for me when I first started out. Like, you just don't know. But again, if you just start something that you're comfortable with, and then you can build on that years down the road. And I can't tell you how many clients that I've had that start a policy and then within, a few months, because you learn so much once you have it. You're like, oh, now I understand this. I didn't understand this fully. Now that I have it, I see this or that, whatever. And then they start a second one or a third one. And same thing with yourself. You started with one and now you have five. So, and yeah, you're 2 years in, maybe not even that.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably should know.
But whatever. It's a thing.
Look,
but I love the people that.
Go
ahead.
Oh, I got something to add.
People that want to sit down and lay it out. Like, here's what I'm doing now. So let's take your $2,500 a year homeowners insurance. And assuming that doesn't go up, which I'm assuming it does go up annually, but let's just say it doesn't. Yeah, so you write a check for $2,500 and pay your homeowner's insurance, and you do that every year for 20 years. At the end of 20 years, you spent $50,000, and you literally have nothing to show for it. Zero. You already had your home before you bought the insurance. It's 100% gone. That $50,000 left your family. So, okay, that's what you're doing now, Mr. Potential Client. Now we're going to set you up with this specially designed banking policy, and we're going to put that $2,500 a year in there, turn around and take it back out, and we're going to pay your homeowner's insurance every year just like you're doing now. And at the end of that 20 years, you're going to have about $50,000, the same amount you've paid over that 20 years in your cash value. However, that first year, you're going to have to supplement it and pay that extra 40% you alluded to. You're going to have to throw in an extra $1,000. So the question is, do you want to kind of supplement the difference in that first year, that 40% that you're not going to get starting this business? You want to throw in that extra $1,000 that first year, knowing that at the end of that 20 years, you're going to have $50,000. Again, a lot of people say, well, yeah, obviously that's a no-brainer. And then they start thinking of, well, what if I did this with my, with taxes or with tithe or with, it goes on and on.
That's the fun and that we get to have. And this is exactly what I was going to add on, Mike. Once policies are enforced, in other words, once a client has a policy ready to be used, that's where our real job comes in. Our job is not to get people a policy and then say, have a good day. We'll catch you again next time. I had that conversation. This gentleman, well, can I call you after I get my? Yes, you can call me. That's what I like to do. Give me a call. Let's talk strategy. I enjoy thinking through your situation with you, and let's come up with a plan so to know exactly what to do when. That's when the fun of it comes in. And you like to use your airplane example. So let's do it. Let's do it one more time. We don't get you just get you the jet. I've had the experience of talking with people. Their agent, Mike, will buy them the jet, and then they sit there with the jet in a hangar, and they're like, "I'm just shoving money into this thing. I don't know what I'm doing." And it's almost frustrating for them. So what I try to communicate as well as I can, and I know you do as well, is that's essentially where our job starts. Let's have some conversations each year. Do you want to pay the same way? How are you leveraging it this year? Are you going to take it out and do a cash value loan to buy your boat or whatever? And then what's it going to look like to get it repaid? Do you have to? At what rate? All those kind of discussions are where the fun lies. So for the listener, I want to be sure it's communicated again very clearly that once a policy is had, in other words, it's in your possession, that's where Mike and I's job comes in. So I don't want people to feel like, these guys are just hands off at that point. We love to have those discussions. So that I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Once that first policy, once you make the decision as a listener, how much goes in for your premium, that's when Mike and I can secure it for you. And then we can start talking strategy. So I just want to make sure that was iterated one more time, Mike. That's all.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's the fun for me is once you buy the fighter jet, once you put your money in your policy, it's what you do with it after the fact. That's the fun part. And I think I've said before on here, I mean, well over 90% of what I do on a day-to-day basis is with clients that have one or several policies that have been clients of mine for years, and we talk about different things on how to fly the plane, how to use the policy, how to use the cash they have to go out and solve a problem, to make a purchase or whatever. So yes, that's the fun for us is after the fact.
I'm glad you didn't say that 90% of your day was answering Dave's questions about IBC. That's nice. Because that may be true on some
No.
days. I use up my quota very quickly by 10 a.m. on some days. Like, Dave, I got other stuff. I got other people. Okay, I'll just got questions. So I'll say that because if I don't have an answer, which I'm getting to the point where I'm pretty solid, but if I don't have the answer, Mike's got the answer. And we enjoy doing that to the extent that we can. We enjoy helping people. So, all right, we're running out of time. Is there anything for the good of the cause, Mike, that you want to add to the question? How much money should go into my first policy? It depends.
It depends. Call
Yeah.
us. We can talk about it. We can kind of
Yeah.
help you walk through the decision-making process, but ultimately it's going to depend on what you're comfortable with.
And that's exactly correct. Give us a call. We'd love to talk to you about it. Please do so. It's a genuine invitation. I know I can say that till I'm blue in the face, but until you as a listener take that step and make the call, we don't get to start that conversation. So please do. The phone number is 507-205-2284. My email is dave@familybakingsolutions.com. Mike's is mike@familybakingsolutions.com. You can find all that information in the show notes. Like, subscribe. That's my least priority in all this, but I got to remember to say it. So, Mike Stevens, it was nice having you back on the podcast.
Good seeing you.
Well, I like when the world gets a little bit more Mike Stevens in it. I appreciate when that happens. So, all right. Thank you all for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.